Okay, what I'm going to be tying here is a blue winged olive Barr Emerger. I'm using a TMCO 2487 curved hook and some UTC 70 denier tan or brown thread. I'm going to be using tan here. What I'm going to do is just tie in at the eye there, just to get my thread started. Then I'm going to just take some brown or ginger, strung neck hackle. You don't really have to use any high grade stuff. All I want is just some nice long hackle fibers in the right color for my tails. And I strip off a clump, and what I try to do is get the tips as even as possible. You can just pluck one out of there if it's a stray. And I'm going to lay those on top of the hook shank, and I'm going to measure it out. I want my tails to be about as long as the hook shank. Just kind of eyeball it. I'm going to lash those down, and I'm going to tie back onto the bend. I'm going to tie a little bit of ways down the bend, not too far, but just enough to where it starts to curve. I'm going to trim my hackle fibers there. Oop, I'm going to clip my thread there. I'm going to cover all this up with some dubbing anyways, so I don't really care what it looks like underneath. Next, I'm going to take some olive or olive brown dubbing, and I like to use super fine dubbing. It's nice and fine. I can get a nice tight body out of it. And the idea with dubbing is you put just enough on to coat the thread. It's really easy to overdo it with the dubbing and put too big of a clump on. So I start with just a small amount and add it until I'm happy with how much is on the thread. I'm careful not to overdo it. Now I'm just going to dub a fairly sparse body. I don't want to make it too bulky. And I'll kind of taper it a little bit as I go forward. I'll wet my fingers and kind of get some of the tough pieces to lay down. There we go. I'm pretty happy with that. Next, I'm going to tie in some more of those hackle fibers. This is going to be for my thorax or my wing case, whatever you'd like to call it. And these, I don't really care if they're straight or not. I'm just going to tie those in. I'll kind of wrap back up onto my dubbing just a little bit. And I want my body to be about 2/3 of the green dubbing, the body, and about 1/3 of the thorax. And that's about the proportions that I'm. Actually I did. First I want to tie in my flashback. So if you're going to do a plain Barr Emerger with no flashback, you would have done the step I just did, but I like to use flashback, so I'm going to tie in my medium piece of mylar flashback material. Just lay that back. Then I'm going to tie in my hackle fibers for the thorax. Just like that. Let's clean all that up just a little bit, just to kind of make it a little bit smoother. Now what I'm going to do is tie in some Adams Gray superfine dubbing for the thorax. I've seen guys use brown and other colors, but I like to use the gray. Just a pretty all-purpose color for me. And again, be careful not to overdo it. And I'm just going to lay down enough to kind of build up a little bit of a ball and cover up my thread. Careful not to overdo it. Add a little more here. There we are. Next, I'm going to take my hackle fibers and peel them forward. I'm going to lay down 2 wraps, just like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take them and split them, kind of like a jujube nymph. And these are going to be the legs. I just do one at a time, just like that. Then I take my mylar and I'm going to fold that over the top of the fly. And I kind of double back on it just like that to keep it in place. I'm going to trim that mylar and whip finish. Then I'm gonna trim my legs so I have just little pieces sticking out, just like a little mayfly. And that's all there is to the Barr Emerger.